I don't identify as European. I mean, I would identify as British, and I think most British people actually weren't brought up to identify as European. And I suppose, um, I would definitely say that Britain is a part of Europe, even if no longer the Union. But yeah, personally, I think the small body of water, the Channel, and the fact that I didn't really visit Europe very much as a child, meant that that wasn't really a core part of my identity. My formative European moment would have been probably when I went traveling in my the first summer when I was at university. Um, because until then I hadn't. I think I had been to Europe maybe once or twice for short holidays, but I hadn't really travelled around. And so I suppose that really, um, I suppose, gave me more of an appreciation for it as a place that could be visited rather than a sort of slightly more abstract idea, and really appreciating the kind of the beauty of the place and the history and also the diversity. The differences of culture that exist in countries that are actually very close together, um, but the feeling that it is in some sense one, um, I suppose, a homogenous place that you could travel within quite easily, and that there was some um, feeling that it wasn't just a set of separate countries. I mean, the lack of borders is fairly conspicuous, and the fact that you can travel on by train around all these different countries. I think the worst moment for me in recent history, European history, would have to be the sovereign debt crisis and I suppose the financial crisis in Europe, in general. I think partly because, of course, the outcomes were pretty bad in the short to medium term. It was a horrible period for like millions across Europe, um, and I think also because it exposed perhaps a more inherent issue with um, trying to run a monetary union. And I mean, of course, that's not just the European Union, because there are countries in the EU that aren't in the monetary union, but I think they're quite closely related. And there were issues with this, having the euro across a set of very heterogeneous countries, and you had differences in culture for how to actually respond to the crisis. I think Germany was fairly reluctant to actually engage in heavy fiscal stimulus, which is what eventually happened and what was necessary. But I think it really showed that while some aspects may be easy to agree on when you have a union, there can be thorny issues with very real outcomes where a lack of a clear political union, um, or a lack of a sort of all-encompassing political union, can cause issues with the economic side. Best moment in recent European history, not to be too British focused, but I guess that's the lens through which I've been viewing Europe now my whole life. I was actually quite relieved when a deal was reached. Um, it wasn't. I would have preferred a closer tie between Europe and Britain. I mean, I voted for Remain, and I would have liked a deal that sort of kept a lot of the benefits. I think Erasmus, for example, um, I thought was a nice scheme that I know other people who really benefited from. But I was overall happy that we got a deal and that compromise was reached, and that I think there was a genuine conflict between the two, where I think there was a misunderstanding about what most of the British public had voted for, in terms of sovereignty. Um, and I think I was really pleased that something was reached that meant there wasn't a crash out with economic damage on both sides of the channel. There was what seemed like a reasonable negotiation on a lot of aspects, and a feeling that we could maybe move forward, and that the country in which I live could have a useful relationship with Europe going forward, and that cooperation could continue to happen even after the vote in 2016, that we could reach understanding on issues. And so I found that quite positive, and I think, it came really from both sides, really. I think there was compromise on both sides, but I thought that was a nice moment for me personally to see that cooperation could be reached, even when it seemed impossible. It's hard to pick one single thing that the EU has done for me personally, partly because so many of its benefits are somewhat indirect. I haven't lived or worked abroad, and I think it would be somewhat trivial to suggest that just not having to queue as long as airports is its major benefit. I think probably it's the academic funding that indirectly flows from the EU is where I've benefited most at a personal level. I can't really pick one grant where I was just given money, but I think that a lot of projects I've worked on, I think possibly my scholarship as well, is indirectly linked to the huge amount of money that the EU channels into academic enterprise. And I think that's probably the main area in which I've seen personal benefit to date. I suppose you could also say actually that being able to work with so many international EU students and colleagues who are here partly because the European Union has made it easy for them to work as academics in Britain, has also been a big benefit. Even if I haven't done the travelling, I think I've benefited from the freedom of movement. Some meaningful progress on climate change. That's not to say that I wouldn't put kind of net zero necessarily as a sort of specific target, because I think for a start you end up with problems of measurement. Whether if you just start importing products rather than producing them yourself, and then your carbon footprint magically disappears. I think that those aren't necessarily very useful ways of directing climate policy, but I would like to see certain policies really given some weight. I think tariffs in accordance with or accounting for the environmental impact, like pretty heavy tariffs would be nice. I think pretty heavy taxation on flights, which are also very bad, obviously, for the environment. And I think, some sort of actual shifting away from, or shifting towards environmentally friendly energy production would be nice. So I think, some meaningful climate change. I mean, I'm not a climate change expert, and therefore I wouldn't necessarily put down the specific goals, but from what I've seen of climate experts who do talk about it, I think there could be a lot more progress and a lot more quickly. And I think maybe too much time is spent praising ourselves, and this is not just an EU phenomenon, but praising ourselves for what has been achieved rather than actually realizing how little has been achieved of what should be achieved. And the main thing is really we need to start spending money on climate change in a significant way, more than just marching or using paper bags in the shop. I think heavy taxation would be really something I would like to see in the next decade.